Hello, welcome to DIY is my happy place. This is the fifth in a 5-part series, and today we're going to be talking about how to make this cute little A-frame sign. And like I say, this is the fifth part. We've already done gnomes, bees and flowers, beehives, pom-poms. So if you want to check out any of those videos and you haven't already, go check them out. Now, these are the two things that are going to be needed to make this A-frame sign. A skirt, which I used on my gnome, part of the fabric, and I'm going to use part of the fabric on this, which it is very wrinkly. So you do need to iron it, and you have to put a towel over it so it doesn't melt it. I did find out that you can put a wet towel and the skirt in the dryer, and it will get those wrinkles out, but I'm telling you, the wrinkles don't come out on their own. I've tried to wet it, hang it, flatten it. Yeah, if you don't either iron it or put it in the dryer, those wrinkles are going to be permanently there, and you'll definitely see them in your craft. So, okay, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and cut the little yellow mesh off, because I won't need that for this, but I will save it. I'll use it for something for sure. As you can see in the background, I've got part of my flowers and bees and ladybugs and all my little things that I'm working on. Now, this book, I made a bunch of recipe books over Christmas, and I used the insides. I used a bunch of insides, so I had leftover books, and I have a couple of leftover recipes on this cardstock, and so I never like to waste anything. So I decided to make this book into an A-frame sign, and it works so great. This is actually my second one that I'm doing. So I'm going to put fabric on the outside of it. Now, there's a couple of ways you can do it. You can either just put the fabric directly on, or you can even put some batting in between if you want it to be kind of like a puffy sign. So either way will work. Now, the rest of that fabric that I'm cutting off, I will, of course, save for yet another gnome or sign. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to glue this down with hot glue, and I've got my little stick here in order to hold it into place when I'm gluing. I am not going to be adding the stuffing. I'm just going to have it flat onto my book. I remember the very first time I made one of these books. I actually did it for a book rather than a sign, and that was a long time ago, and that was actually the first time I ever used hot glue. So I'm not even going to tell you how many years ago, or you would know how old I am. But anyway, I love hot glue, and it still works, and this technique still works great. So we're going to put a little bit glue over here, and then I definitely recommend using a stick in order to fold this all over evenly. Now I have my hot glue little fingertip things that work if you're just putting glue down on one spot here or there, but I want this to be completely even. I want to keep those stripes straight, and so I want it all to fold over at the same time. As you can see from my stick, I've used this same stick for a lot of different hot glue. I have a stick that I use, and I have a pencil that I reuse over and over again until they get so much hot glue that they need to be recycled. Okay, now for the corners. You want to give them some hot glue, and then you pull the corner all the way in. So you don't want to do this like you would a wrapping a gift, because then the seams will be in the wrong place. So you just want to hot glue the corners and then put them directly in towards the center of the book. And you also want to make sure that you flatten out the glue in these spots once you put it down. So I just kind of push it down to flatten out the glue, because if it's too bumpy there, you'll see those seams on the inside. So yeah, just use your stick to make sure that the hot glue flattens out, and that's all there is to it. This is really one of the most simple little crafts I've ever done, and it just stands the test of time. It's just so great to be able to use fabric. And I use this recipe book, well, it's like a photo album or whatever. I have about 10 of them left over, because when I was making my recipe books for my kids for Christmas, I needed more fillers. So I took 3 or 4 of the fillers to add to each book. So I had extra books, and I will definitely use them for different signs and different things. And I'm always looking for different ways to add to my gnomes, and I actually really love positive quotes. I'm a positive quote kind of person, and I like to have little quotes, and I change them out so often just because I'm always trying to, have a different thing to think about. So that is the idea behind making this little A-frame. I have done some of my gnomes that they have little quotes that they hold in their hand, like using the chalkboard little gift tag things. But you can only fit so much onto something like that. So if I wanted something with more words, because I came up with the quote from President Hinckley of 9 things to be happy. And I love to use the spin of be happy and turn it into a beehive decoration. So that's where that came from. That's actually where this whole idea came from. I wanted to do something with bumblebees. I wanted to do something with the quote. So that's where it started. It started with the quote, and now we're going to end with the quote. So it's perfect. Now you can see, I was talking about just a minute ago that in the background I have bees and flowers, and if you haven't seen the tutorial of how to make those, you can check out my channel and find out how to do them. There are some tips and tricks for those. Now here's a piece of cardstock that was left over from my recipes that I did at Christmas, and I'm going to go ahead and use it to line the inside of my A-frame sign. And I found that if you don't line the inside, you will see, when the sign is sitting up, you will see the creases inside, and you'll see, the mechanics of the sign. And you don't want to be able to see that. You want everything to be finished. Now you can do this with fabric, but I didn't want to waste my fabric on the inside of a sign. So I'm just using a piece of cardstock to do that. So I just need to cut it down to size, and you want it to be smaller than the size of the book, because once it folds over, it will kind of start to pop out a little bit. So you do want to have it just a little bit smaller, and that's why we have the fabric coming in about a half an inch or an inch inside so that it will have somewhere to glue on. Okay, now, as far as how to glue this on, you can do a couple of things. You could either use like the super glue that I pick up from the Dollar Tree or that cement glue. But in this case, I think I'm going to go ahead and use hot glue, even though I don't want it to have ridges. So I'm just going to score the center so it knows where to bend. And I'm going to give it some hot glue and then just with my stick work to make sure that it really flattens out. I mean, I could always use this other, but I like to be able to have it immediately dry within a few minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and do it with the hot glue. So I'm going to be generous with my glue here, and knowing that I've got to work pretty quickly, because if it starts to dry, then there'll be little ledges there, little bumps. But if I get it on there really quickly, then I can flatten it out with my stick and make sure that there's no little bumps underneath. Okay, so there we have it. I'm just going to push all that down, give it a nice little stick maneuver here and just glide it across the whole way, and especially making sure that the very edges are really pinned down, because that's going to be where we're going to glue on the block on the inside of the A-frame. Okay, so now that we got that glued down, this is just one of the fastest things. Now I picked up some, these are wooden blocks that are from a Jenga game that we had. I actually wanted to get the Jenga blocks from the Dollar Tree, but they've been sold out for a while. I've been trying for about a month. I got some earlier and didn't get quite enough because I'm using them to make a chess board. I'm really excited about this chess board, but haven't been able to see them for a while. So this is actually just a Jenga game that we had at home, but hopefully it'll come back at the dollar store, and you can do the same idea with the dollar store Jenga pieces. But basically what I do is just take my black marker and color the whole thing in so that my blocks that are going to be inside the A-frame just kind of disappear in there. And you could paint them, spray paint them, or paint them. But I tend to like to use markers because then they're instantly dry and I can just immediately use them. So that's what I would suggest. Okay, now we've got our A-frame book completely lined on the inside and the outside. So it's ready to have the blocks put on the bottom. Now, you do want to make sure that the corners are really glued down. And if there's any part that lifts at all, go ahead and do your thing with the glue and make sure they're really down well, because this is where the blocks are going to be glued. Okay, now we're getting close. I am going to say that this has got to be one of the fastest DIY crafts that I've done for a while, and it was really nice to end the Beehive Gnome display with a quick, easy craft. Here's my little quote that I was talking about, and I do have a free printable. I'll put a link below if you want to print this very quote out and do the same thing. It will be linked in my description. But you could use any quote you wanted. This is just a really fun one. 9 ways to be happy. Okay, now I am going to use the super glue that I got from the Dollar Tree because I want this paper, it's just on cardstock, and I want it to really be stuck onto the fabric. I don't want it lifting and popping off. And with hot glue, paper on fabric on hot glue, it'll kind of pop off. So I'm given a generous amount of this glue onto my cardstock, just smushing it all around to keep it nice and flat. And I will say you want to, when you're using this kind of glue, you want to be in a ventilated area because it is very strong smelling. You can use the white cement glue and it doesn't smell, not like the super glue. So either one of those will work just fine. You just want to use a very strong glue. And now we want to center it on one side of the book. So you just find the very center and push it down. And that is how we get our quote. So it's coming together. Okay, now we're going to take our black blocks that we colored with the marker, and it just takes 2 of them. And you really could use the popsicle sticks for this too if you weren't able to get a hold of another kind of block. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put those blocks on either side here, glue them down. Now, one little tip that I will say for when you're gluing something like this down, I like to use both types of glue. I like to use hot glue so it'll be instantly adhered, but I also like to eventually add some super glue to it so that it'll have a stronger hold. But of course the super glue takes a couple hours, 6-12 hours to dry, to really dry well. So that's why in a lot of my crafts, I'll use both hot glue and super glue to really reinforce them. And then the nice thing about this particular book as the template or as the main frame is that it can kind of bend a little bit and fold around so that we're going to get that A-frame shape. And you do have to kind of hold it in place for a minute until the glue has cooled off. And I always hate waiting around, so I tend to do 2 things at once where I'll glue on one side and hold on the other. Now, while we're letting this, while I'm putting that on, I want to talk a little bit about hot glue, and that is, I don't know if you've ever noticed, but in the background I have my little pie tin for my hot glue gun. That's what I used for so many years. And my next craft, I decided right when I was making this, I don't care what happens, I am making myself a nice hot glue stand and actually workstation for my hot glue sticks and everything. So that is going to be my next post next Wednesday that will show how to make a hot glue gun. Don't know exactly what I'm going to do yet, but it'll be something because I've always tried to hide that ugly pan that I have in the background, but I need to have something to be proud of. And since I definitely like to use my hot glue gun, that's what I'm going to do. Okay, now we'll get back to our little A-frame. We'll just keep on letting that glue adhere. And then I'll add some more super glue and we're getting close to done. All I need now is to add some flowers and some bumblebees. And that is all there is to it. Isn't that cute? Oh, I love it so much. And it goes so good with the gnome, the bumblebee gnome, and the the beehive that I made. All of these things are made from Dollar Tree supplies. And so it's just so easy, other than just, your printable. That the rest of the things you can get from the dollar store. Now here's my little flower, and these are really hard. I made these, and so they've already dried with my little tips and tricks that I use to dry them out. And when you put hot glue on, even though they're hard, the hot glue will melt a little bit, which is really nice actually, because it helps to adhere the flower right directly where we want it. So I think a sunflower would be appropriate with my bumblebee look. Maybe a couple more bumblebees, and then that is all there is to it. What do you think? I'd like and subscribe, and if you don't mind, give me a comment if you'd like to see more types of signs, more types of gnomes. I'd really love to hear what your thoughts are. Oh, drop that one. As you can see, it's hard. It sounds like a rock because it is. It's hard as a rock, and that's what I was going for, so that it will be able to stand the test of time. So there we have it. 9 ways to be happy. Be true, be still, be humble, be clean, be positive, be smart, be involved, be prayerful, be grateful. I love it. Thank you so much for sticking with me, and I will see you all again soon. Now, don't forget, there's other parts of this. This is the 5th part. We have already done the gnome, the bees and flowers, the beehive, and the pom-poms. So there you have it.